Hello, my name is Ashley Flores, and I'm the Director of Animal Behavior and Training at Great Plains SPCA, and I would like to welcome you to the Advanced Canine Behavior Training. Dogs use body language as a way to communicate with others around them. So we're going to be talking about some different body language that dogs may display with you at the shelter or outside of the shelter. This is considered dominance aggression behavior. It is offensive threat because normally they're lunging towards you. And this can be fear-based. They can be doing this because they're afraid of something. They can be doing this for a multitude of reasons. So as you can see by the diagram to the left, in the pictures you can see hackles raised. That is just a type of what we call piloerection. Piloerection is just when the hair is furred up and it's due to some type of high arousal. So it's kind of like goosebumps for humans. Humans can get goosebumps when they're scared, when they're happy, when they're in love, when they're spooked out. It just means you're highly sensitive and aroused to a situation, and that's what piloerection means. So a lot of times people will see dogs with their hackles up, and they will think that the dog is displaying aggression, but actually it can be a mixed signal because an animal at a dog park can have their hackles up when new dogs are coming into the playground area. So some other ones, ears forward, maybe spread slightly to the side to form a wide V shape. Forward body posturing, as you can see, is in the dog to the right on leash. Sometimes you can see vertical wrinkles. Their nose is usually wrinkled. Their lips are usually curled if you can get close enough to see without getting hurt. But ideally, you don't want to look if you can avoid trouble, right? Teeth and often gums are visible. Sometimes gums are not visible. It depends on the type of dog too. The mouth open will have kind of a C shape, and you should be able to see the corner of the mouth is forward. So that's why I chose this picture, because I think this is a great display of that behavior. Also, stiff leg stance and body leaning slightly forward. And this is just so that animals can make themselves look larger and scarier, because essentially they're doing a lot of bluffing behavior to a potential threat. And bluffing is basically a way to avoid fighting that may result in a physical altercation without having to do it. Because ideally they want to bluff and then have the other animal be scared and back down. So that is what happens initially, and then if the other animal or person is not backing down, then that can turn into a potentially dangerous situation or altercation. Some dogs will wait until the human is turned away before displaying offensive aggression. I see this a lot at the shelter where this dog was growling and barking and lunging at me, but would not make contact, was afraid, and then ran around my back and then tagged me in my right arm. It was just a small pressure bite, left a little bruise, but that shows a lack of confidence of that animal. So the animal's very afraid, is displaying aggression towards me, but is really afraid and is just trying to get me to get away or become submissive to the animal. So that is something that can happen. Something that I would like for you to take away is that dominance is a situational display. It's not a characteristic of the animal. So I have seen a lot of times where people will say, oh, that's a dominant animal. But some dominant animals or animals displaying dominant behaviors are not going to be dominant in all situations. So for an example, in a classroom setting, when I'm speaking, everyone is being quiet and they're listening to me, so I'm being dominant in that situation. But if you come to my office and have a conversation with me, then I'm sitting at my desk and I'm being quiet and I'm listening to you, so you're being the dominant in that situation. So I just wanted to let you guys know that dominance is situational and not characteristic of an animal. We had two dogs that played together, and one would be very bossy with one, and everyone was like, "Oh, that's a really dominant dog." And so then I was like, "You know what? They're not, and let me prove this to you." So I got the mom dog and put her in. Well, I guess I didn't disclose that yet, but they were a mother and daughter. So the mother daughter was the one being really bossy over the daughter dog, and we put her in another room, and she was being very submissive to everyone. And we put the daughter dog in another group, and she was being very bossy because she's learning these bossy behaviors from her mother. So that was just an example of how a dominant situation of an animal can change depending on its environment. This is what fear aggression looks like, which is the defensive body stance. This is an animal that is displaying aggression when they feel that something might be coming towards them, and they're doing a lot of bluffing behaviors to diffuse any potentially dangerous situations that they might come encounter with. So here's a picture of a dog actually doing it to the left, and on the right is the diagram. So you see body is very low. It doesn't look as confident. Their hackles can be raised. To the dog to the left, he does not have his hackles raised, which we call piloerection, which you learned earlier. Also, ears are down, pupils are dilated, nose wrinkled, lips slightly curled, teeth may be visible. Usually don't see a lot of gums. Corner of the mouth pulled back, and the tail is usually tucked or at least low. It doesn't necessarily have to be tucked, but it's usually low, and you're not going to see a high tail. High tail usually means alert. So that is fear aggression. The lower body posturing will try to make themselves appear smaller, but will puff bluff, which is kind of like huffing noises, like a it's kind of what you're kind of hear if they feel the need to defend themselves. These animals usually try to have their faces towards you, but will back up and curve their body away, which is what you're seeing in that left photo of that black dog being low, but keeping its face towards you and kind of curving up, having a body curve and curling up a little bit. They're just trying to protect themselves from potentially dangerous situation, and fear aggression is a survival technique. So they are just doing what they think is right. They're just displaying body language to protect themselves. This is what stress and anxiety looks like. You'll see a lot of the dog to the right is actually yawning. Yawning is now what we call appeasing or a calming signal. They will do rapid panting or huffing noise, which is like a pupils will be dilated, their ears will be back. They usually have a lowered body posture. Their tail is usually pretty low or tucked. You'll also see a lot of sweating through the paws. If you've ever taken your dog to a vet and you've seen their little paw prints on the steel table, a lot of the reason why is that because they're stressed or they're displaying anxiety in a new environment. You will sometimes see painting. Painting behaviors in a shelter is when a dog defecates in their kennel and then steps in it and smears it everywhere. So it looks just like there's feces all over the place. And the reason why they do that is because when dogs get really nervous, they just start pacing a lot. And you'll also kind of, what I call this is parameter checking. What they'll do is they'll just kind of keep circling and walking the parameter of the environment or enclosure that they're in to just check for places to get out, see, to understand their environment. So they do that, they start jumping in their poop, and then it gets everywhere, and it's pretty messy. We certainly don't love it, but it is definitely a red flag to us that this animal is in severe stress and is having some type of anxiety for whatever reason. You can also see overcompulsive disorders, excessive circling, jumping in kennels, or tail chasing. Those are also some red flags of anxiety. I always hear people like laughing about, dogs chasing their tails or show me a video of that, but that's actually really a pretty red flag behavior that something is wrong with the animal if they're chasing their tails. And we should never teach our dogs to do that, even though we think it may be funny. It is actually not very funny at all. Animals can be physically harming themselves by trying to get out of an environment, try to get out of a kennel, to scuffing their nose, hurting their face when they're trying to escape from places. Another one is happy tail. So happy tail is when the dog's tail is wagging. And so a lot of people think if a dog's tail is wagging, then the dog is happy, but that's actually not the case. There are multitude of reasons of why dogs wag their tail. And some of it can be stress and anxiety. So it's more important to understand where the tail on the body is to understand if the dog is happy, play, alert, nervous, aggressive, all those things. But so tail wagging does not mean that a dog is happy or in a good place, by the way. One of those things that a lot of people don't know. But anyway, so the dog will wag its tail, usually low level, and will hit it on the side of the kennels, and it'll break open some blood vessels, and then it looks like a bloody scene. My dog had that at one time, and I came home and it just looked like there was blood all over the walls. We're like, what on earth? So if you see that, that's another red flag. And why they call it happy tail, I could not tell you. It is not happy tail, I can tell you that. But that is what it's called. We also have separation anxiety. They can have separation anxiety or isolation distress. The differences between that is separation anxiety usually means that an animal is displaying anxiety when something they are attached to has been removed. So it's usually a person. So if a person is attached to one person in the family and that one person leaves and they are just frantic and really upset, but there's someone else in the room and they're still displaying those behaviors, and that's separation anxiety. Isolation distress would be when an animal is displaying those behaviors anytime they're left alone. There's also confinement anxiety. Confinement anxiety is when they are displaying anxiety or destructive behaviors anytime that they get stuck in a small space like a crate or bathroom. So how do you know if an animal is emotionally stable? So at the shelter, when I see an animal displaying stress and anxiety, I do not behaviorally evaluate them until they're emotionally stable. So how do I know that? If the dogs can do two things for me, then I know if they're ready to be tested. So one, will they take food? When animals are stressed, when humans are stressed, a lot of times we do not eat when we're in severe stress. Two, will they make an attempt to do a basic command? Most animals know sit and shake, about 80% of the animals, but if they don't know it, then a lot of times they'll still be lured to do it by a high quality food. So if they can do these two things, then they are ready to be assessed. If they are not doing either of these things, then you're not going to get an accurate behavior evaluation of this animal because of the stress and anxiety that this animal is displaying at this time. So that's something we think about and work with the animals. A lot of times we put them on 24 to 48-hour cool downs. We'll put them in foster homes. We'll do different things until we can see these two behaviors to know that we can behaviorally evaluate them. And then we have fear and submission. So as you can see from the left, we've got a dog, ears back, forward, forehead is smooth, eye contact is brief and indirect. They're usually averting attention if possible, licking face of dominant dog or at the air or at even people. A lot of times you can see the corner of the mouth, but they usually have a pretty closed mouth. You can also see a paw raised sometimes. A paw raised means a couple of different things, but in this situation, it means that they're trying to diffuse a potentially dangerous situation. May leave sweaty footprints. The tail is usually kind of down and low, and then you will also see a lowered body stance. So to the right, you see a dog being submissive. So this dog is laying on their back, and they're displaying submission by showing them something very vulnerable to whatever could be a threat, which is their tummy. So their tummy is a vulnerable place. And so if they're displaying that, that is them saying, hey, I do not want to fight. Here's my belly. As you can see, there is no threat from me coming here. Now, something I see a lot of times here at the shelter is when we have a dog displaying submission and they roll over on their back, people will start rubbing their belly. And this is actually absolutely the wrong time to be rubbing a dog's belly. And so a lot of times people will get nipped during this time because the dog is actually really scared. And if you start rubbing their belly when they're scared, they're going to start nipping at you or biting and running away. So if you see an animal that is loose and wiggly and jumping on its back, you can rub its belly for a second and then pull away and see what happens. If this dog starts nudging you to rub his belly again, that probably means he wants his belly rubbed. If the dog, if you rub the belly for a second or two, and then the dog like jumps up and runs away, that probably means they did not want their belly rubbed. So things to think about as a dog on their back displaying their belly does not necessarily always want their belly rubbed. And that's something that we need to learn here at the shelter and everywhere in life, personally, in my opinion. Okay, so we're going to be talking about the learning theory and why positive reinforcement is the best training method, in my opinion, in a minute. But before we get to that, expectations and setting dogs up for success is something else we're going to be talking about. And earlier, I did say that 80% of dogs come into the shelter knowing sit and shake. And it's a kind of a fun question because a lot of people ask me why. The reason why is, first of all, sit is the thing that people usually want to teach their dog. Shake is something actually dogs teach us normally, and then we get reinforced to do that behavior. So the reason why dogs shake so easily on command is because when dogs are puppies and they're trying to get milk from their mother, as they're suckling on their mother, they will, when they want more milk or more milk to come out faster, they'll get their paw and they'll hit her breast. And so when that happens, the milk comes out faster. So they have learned at a very early age that throwing your paw up and doing a bit of a kind of a behavior where your paw goes up and hits something gets you food. So a lot of times you'll see puppies in my class, they'll do a sit and then they'll do a lay down. And then if they don't understand a behavior, they'll get frustrated and they'll just start shaking their hand up in the air because they're just trying to get food. And then what happens is we grab their hand and give them food and we say, hey, we just taught our dog shake. When in reality, the dog taught us how to shake with them. And in a lot of cases, not all cases. But I just wanted to let you know that that's why a lot of animals know shake is because it's a learned behavior that shaking their paw gets them food and somehow, and then we just reinforce it, and then they keep continually shake as they get older. And I said only about 80%. Some animals don't have people that teach them things or train them, or they live in just different environments. So sometimes they don't. So having an animal to be able to lure with food if they don't know a behavior is also something that signifies that the dog is still in a comfortable environment and that maybe they just don't know how to sit or shake. Another thing that is important is petting and praising dogs that are calm. This is really important because a lot of times we do a really good job of telling dogs when they do something wrong, but we don't tell them when they do something right. And dogs are associative learners and they learn in patterns. So if we can praise them when they're doing the right things, they're going to want to repeat those behaviors later on. So I'm always telling people to pet and praise their dogs when they're calm or when they're laying down or they're doing the right things so that they can repeat those behaviors. Being calm and confident is very important. Dogs are going to be calmer and respond to you better if you do. If you're nervous or if you just have high anxiety, that's actually going to give the animals those same types of behaviors. So that has happened where I've seen animals come into the shelter and the family was a high anxiety family and they're like, this dog is just it's just so nervous. And then I get the dog alone into a calm and quiet home and then the dogs are doing so much better. So dogs do feed on you, or feed off of your behaviors. So that's important that dogs feed off of how you're feeling and you can do the same with dogs. So things to think about. Patience is one of the most important things that you can do when working with pets. It is a lot of work in teaching dogs how to do things in the beginning, but after they've learned the skill, this is a skill that they can attain and have for the rest of their life. So for an example, I have a dog, believe it or not, and her name is Clarabelle. And so she liked going to the PetSmart. And so when we went to PetSmart, she would pull every time she tried to go in there into the store. So what I decided to do is every time that she would pull on the leash, I would take her straight back to the car and have her get in the car and set for 2 seconds. I only did a short amount of time because dogs' short-term memory is much different than ours. But anyway, she went back into the car. So our walks looked very weird in the beginning. People thought I looked like a crazy person because we would walk 2-3 feet. She'd pull, we'd go back in the car, we'd set 2 seconds, then she'd go 5-10 feet,
pull, get right back into the car. And we kept doing this. I mean, she literally got to the front door of PetSmart, then pulled. As soon as we got in the store, I took her back to the car, sat 2 seconds. At one point, when we were in the middle of the store and she saw some other dog, she started to pull. I took her straight back to the car. We sat for 2 seconds. And this was like a 30 to 45-minute ordeal. And it was not fun for her or me. But that patience was awesome because that 30 to 45 minutes taught her how to not pull at PetSmart for 12 years. So things to think about, like, yes, patience can be really hard for us in the beginning, but it does teach them lifelong skills. So just keep that in mind. Another thing that's important is that all dogs learn differently, just like humans. So a lot of times people will say, "How do I walk a dog on a loose leash?" And I'll say, "I don't know. Let's go do it and see what this dog how we have to do it with this dog." Some dogs will like the stop and go method, and that's where you stop every second the dog pulls and then you go. Then there's the 180 method where every time the dog pulls, you go 180 degrees in the other direction. So there's a lot of different ways of training different behaviors, and some dogs will click onto certain ways of training much faster than others. So just things to think about. So I do a lot of trial and error, and whatever's easiest for the animal to learn is the one I usually go with. Another thing I want to talk to you about is how to properly greet a shelter or unfamiliar dog. We should be making ourselves, especially if the dog is shy and fearful, we should be making ourselves look small, no looming, no putting our body over their body. We need to give them space. We need to give them their space so they feel comfortable. We can, kind of let them approach us instead of us approaching them is really the best way to do it, because then you're not pushing them and then they're going to feel more comfortable with you anyway. So that's something I like to talk to people about because I see a lot of people rushing over to dogs, start petting them all over. Uh, and there are dogs that are really afraid. Uh, so that's just something to think about when you see a new pet, is just to go slow and to really watch what their animal is doing. If the animal is like loving it, super wiggly, jumping, then yeah, okay, the dog is probably very confident and is okay with you touching him. But be mindful that not all dogs are like that. And there are a lot of dogs that are very fearful. And that's just something I want you to keep in mind as you're working with animals at the shelter and even when you're not at the shelter. Okay, so we're going to be talking about the learning theory, and anyone that works in that's a teacher, they know about this already. This is something that we use for animals. This is something that we use for children. This is what we use in any type of training. Is this is the quadrant, the learning theory quadrant. So I am a positive reinforcement trainer. That doesn't mean that I always use positive reinforcement because I actually use negative reinforcement too. So when you hear the word positive, I want you to think of adding something. And when you hear the word negative, I want you to think of taking away something. A lot of times people hear the word positive and negative and they associate those words as being good or bad. But I want you in this session to learn that positive means adding, negative means removing. So positive reinforcement would be when a dog's behavior causes a good thing to happen. The behavior increases. So if a dog sets down, then I give the dog a treat, and that would be what we consider positive reinforcement. So I'm trying to reinforce this behavior by giving them something that they like. Negative reinforcement would be the dog's behavior causes a bad thing to stop and behavior increases. So for example, a dog wants my attention, and if they start jumping up, I turn around and I ignore the dog. So I've just taken away something that the dog wants to get the dog to stop jumping on me. And then the second the dog stops jumping on me and sits down, I turn around and reward the dog with a treat, which is negative reinforcement initially and then ends with positive reinforcement. So I've taken my attention away from that animal until the dog has done something correct. Once the dog's done something correct, I've rewarded the dog, which is again positive reinforcement. So positive punishment That is when you're adding a punishment. And a punishment or a punisher is something that the dog doesn't like. So some people use different things for that. Some people can use shock collars. Some people can use squirt bottles. Some people can use just a whole bunch of different things, right? Just anything that a dog doesn't like is what you're going to be doing. So you're going to be adding a punisher. And then negative punishment is where you take away a punisher. So I'll explain that. So dog's behavior cause a bad thing to happen, so behavior decreases. So if a dog is jumping up and somebody shocks them with an e-collar, that is what we say that we're adding a punisher, something that they don't like, and that causes them to stop the jumping up. Okay. Negative punishment would be taking a punisher away. And a lot of people think that doesn't make sense, but it will when I give you an example. So for example, if the dog is on a shock collar and they are running past their parameter and then they get shocked and then they run back to the house, the shock will stop working because they have changed their body, their location, and got closer to the home. So they've taken away the punisher for doing something, which causes the behavior to decrease. So it can be a little confusing. So these are the four types of these are the types of learning theories. So a lot of the behaviors are used differently. I believe in using a hierarchy of training. I always use positive reinforcement first because that works on 95% of the animals. And then I go up with negative reinforcement and then maybe extinction training and do some other things. I believe that positive punishment is one of the last resorts that you use in training. So that's just what makes me a little different than other trainers. So that is what I'm sharing with all of you. Okay, so we're going to be talking about expectations now. So here are some expectations that we have of pets a lot of times that we don't necessarily have with humans. So in the first row, you can see the bear, which I don't know why it is a bear, but it is avoiding looming behavior. That can be really scary for people, and it's really scary for humans as well. So just think about that when you are about to pet an animal. Staying outside the dog's bubble and presenting your side to the dog is going to make dogs feel much more comfortable and more trusting of you. As on the second row, you see avoid reaching into personal space. This can be if just imagine if some stranger came up and just tried to like start touching your hair or start touching your shirt. That's actually happened to me where people are like, "Oh, I just love your hair." They start grabbing it. And I'm like, "This is super uncomfortable. Why are you touching me?" So it's the same thing for dogs. Avoid reaching your hand out to letting dogs sniff you. I see this a lot, and dogs that are nervous will nip or bite when this happens. And what happens is they just think that you're going to try to hurt them or touch them, and it's scary for them, and so they're reacting to it. So letting the dog approach at his own rate is going to be the best thing for the situation for smoothing things over. On the third row, you're going to see this creepy clown. Avoid close interaction if the person is afraid of you. Avoid petting if the dog looks nervous or tense. Just admire him instead if that's what he would like. Remember, dogs are autonomous creatures, and so they have fears, anxieties, just like we do. If if it's okay for the pet, if he looks relaxed and comes up to you and solicits your attention by rubbing it against you, he probably would like to be petted or touched. And then on the fourth row, I like to. I'm laughing because this actually reminds me of my Aunt Christy. I'm so sorry if you're listening to this, Aunt Christy, but she would pinch my cheek and give me big, like obnoxious, like long hugs and just annoying stuff. So it just drives me crazy. But it's almost like she pinched too hard. And anyway, anyways, avoiding touching inappropriately is what we like, right? This is too familiar and often disliked by dogs as well. So we need to give them space. We need to pet them gently. Another thing that I kind of wanted to talk to you about expectations is a lot of people think that we have animals with more behavior issues today than we did before. And I don't believe that. I think animals are still the same. I think we have more expectations of our pets today than we did back in the day, whatever, long that is. So back in the day, you'd see a dog and they're like, don't touch the dog bites. And today it's, oh my gosh, they're going to get sued for $1 million. So I think that we have a much higher expectation of what our pets do. Um, and to know that biting is actually just a source of communicating, and they're actually trying to communicate with us. Another thing I'd like for you guys to think about when you're at the shelter is these animals go through extreme situations. So they will be either transferred from another shelter, they'll be stray, they'll come from a home that is, where they've lived in a home, and then they get put into a new environment where they get poked and prodded, vaccinated, new people walking them every day, getting spayed and neutered. Then they move over to the pet adoption center where people are walking by their glass, staring at them, tapping at their glass. Feel free to tell people not to tap at glass if you see this, because this is very disturbing for animals. Um, and they're just trying to get them to solicit some kind of behaviors because they want to know if they want to adopt the dog. Another thing is people like to stare at dogs. So, you're not going to adopt a dog that you're not going to look at, right? But a lot of dogs can find that very threatening or confrontational, so that can be really scary for them. So they will avert attention. So things to think about for these animals. They have a really tough time and they're in an environment that's really scary, especially if they were in a loving home. So just things to think about. Another thing that I like to think about is that these animals are in these kennels 24/7. They get to get out for 3, 4 times to go to the bathroom for 5, 10 minutes. So just imagine if you were in an environment where you had to live in your bathroom. You lived in your bathroom, you didn't have a cell phone, and you just have to sit there and you get out 3 times a day to go for a walk. So this is kind of what we're doing with animals. So these animals get really bored and they get really frustrated and they get really tired and they want things from us. So I just to kind of put it in the perception of the animal, just things to think about as when you're working with these animals. Here are some pictures that I took of staff members leashing up dogs. And this is just because I wanted you to see what it looks like from a dog's point of view when we do things. So when we're putting leashes on them, when we're trying to pick them up, when people are kind of like looking at them and we're walking by the kennels and we're looking and talking at them. So just things to think about. Like we can look really scary. So for a shy and fearful animal to see these behaviors can be terrifying for them. So in these situations, this is why we ask you to, get low, go to your side, try not to look so intimidating, to have the pets feel comfortable and want to engage with you. Going slow is really important for many of these animals. Some of these animals don't care and you can get out quickly, that's fine. But there are a lot that are very afraid. So I just want you to think about that when you're taking animals in and out of the kennel and when you're taking them for walks, to try to make it look as least scary as possible for them. So another thing from a dog's point of view, did you know that dogs are actually not colorblind? A lot of people think that dogs are colorblind, but they can see hues of blue and yellow. And on the bottom left diagram, you can see the human spectrum, and then you can see the dog spectrum or dog's view. In the top left picture, the two pictures to the left are what humans see, and the right two pictures are what dogs see. And then same thing with the tennis ball to the right. So you see they can see the yellow tennis ball, but they cannot see the pink or the orange or the red, right? And believe it or not, the most sold color for animals in pet stores is red. They sell more red toys than any other toy, and that's the least stimulating for a dog. You know why? Because it is the most stimulating to a human, which is also why red cars have higher insurance because they get stopped by cars more or police officers more often. So something to think about. Red is very stimulating for humans, not dogs. So when you're getting toys for your pet, think of what is most exciting for them and maybe not so exciting for you. Now everyone knows why dogs like tennis balls so much because they're a really fun color and there's a stimulating color and they can see it really well. So to continue from the dog's point of view, we've got peripheral. So as you can see, the person to the left has 140 degrees and they have about 170 of peripheral. For a dog, it is 60 degrees and then 150 peripheral. And so why is that, right? The reason why is because humans are omnivores, or some of them are, some of them are vegetarians and vegans, but this is kind of how their body was made. And the dog to the right is what we call a predator. So he's a predator. He has to have that kind of vision because the foxes and wolves are out there chasing animals to sustain life, right? So for horses and rabbits, they see at a completely different angle. They see to the sides of them and even to the like rabbits can see the back of them usually, and it's just where they have the eyes placed, placement of the eyes, just to for survival reasons. So the reason why I wanted to share this is because a lot of times people will come up and pet dogs from their side, and then dogs can get nervous or snap or get kind of like just real nervous or quick jerk when they get pet because they actually can't see you because you're in your peripheral vision. And there are some dogs out there that have one eye, and so that means they can only see it at a 30 degrees. And my favorite joke is if they can't see out of either eyes, then they're blind. But anyway, just keep that in mind. So a lot of times, especially with blind dogs or dogs with one eye, or even dogs with 60 degrees and really nervous, I make sure that they know that I'm there before I start petting or touching them because I don't want to startle them in any way possible. So here are some dog training tips that I would like to share with you. So if you see anything that says NILF, nothing in life is free. Sometimes I've seen NFL, which is no free lunch, weird acronyms, but a lot of times we use what we say NILF. So NILF is nothing in life is free training. So this means that the dog has to earn everything that the dog gets before they can get it. So for example, my dogs, they think that going outside is a privilege and not a right. Now, obviously, I'm going to let them go outside and use the bathroom because I don't want them to have an accident in the house and clean it, but they think that it's a privilege. So when they want to go outside, they have to sit, they have to wait, they have to listen, and then they have to do, then they get released. So just teaching them basic kind of just rules. So with a lot of our dogs that display high arousal, which just means high energy, highly active, get frustrated because they're not getting enough exercise or energy released. We do a lot of the nothing in life is free training. And then nothing in life is free training. So basically, you have to sit before they get to go outside, they sit before they get food, etc. So it's just a way of having them earn everything that they get. It's a way for them to learn impulse control. And impulse control just means to teach them to be calm and to wait. So high value treats and rewards. What works? So dogs rely more on their scent, on smelling, than they do actual taste. So high value treats usually are pretty nasty smelling treats. So the nastier the smelling, the more important it is. There are some animals that we just use actual just scents. We'll just use scents and put them into a newspaper and just let them smell the scent, and that can be the reward. It doesn't actually have to be something that they consume. So whatever works, whatever is reinforcing for the animal is what you can use to teach your dog to do them anything. So now we're going to talk about luring versus manipulation. So luring versus manipulation just is a type of training technique. Luring would be having them follow the treat and start. So a lot of times with agility training, you'll see a lot of times the animals will be following the treat as they learn the course. That would be a source of lure. That's what luring means. And manipulation would be as if I asked the dog to sit, they didn't sit, and then I pushed their butt down to the ground. That would be manipulating. So manipulation does work. So a lot of people, which is why a lot of people use it, but I find that luring actually works faster than manipulation. And the reason why is just because you're making it much easier for the dog to understand. So for example, if I ask the dog to sit and I use it with a treat and I'm putting it over their head and putting them, into a sit, they're following with their nose, and so it's a much easier concept for them. If you're using manipulation, it actually just causes it a little bit longer of a process for them to learn. So if you were standing in front of me and I came up to you and I pushed you as hard as I could, what would you do? What would your body do? So your body you would start pushing back immediately because you wouldn't want to fall. You'd do everything you could to keep yourself from falling because falling could mean death, right? In survival world, maybe not, you're going to die if you fall, but in survival world, this is what your brain is going to tell you your body to do to help you and save you. So a lot of times when you get hit or pushed, your body's going to force back in the other direction. So when we're pushing the dog's butt to the ground, they actually start pushing their butt back up without even, this is a subconscious thing, like they're not even thinking about it. They're just doing it automatically. And then after they push up, then they have to say, oh, wait a second, my owner wants me to do this. So then they put their butt down. So it's just, it doesn't mean that it doesn't work. It just takes longer. So that's why I don't use it. I think luring makes more sense because it is a faster way of teaching certain behaviors for me as a trainer. Another way is catching an action and rewarding. So when the animal is doing an action, you reward the animal for that behavior, and then ideally they keep repeating it. Animals are associative learners. They do learn in patterns. So if you keep catching them in the action and rewarding them, then they will start repeating the action on their own. Another thing that's important is just keeping your training sessions short. I have 20 to 30 minutes, and actually that's a little long. I would say more like 15 to 20 minutes in most cases. So a lot of times when you go to an hour training, which yes, this is an hour training, but you can pause it now and listen to it as often as you want or as slow as you want. But you have an hour training, a lot of times you're going to lose it. Your attention's going to be done and you just won't be able to do any more. But people are really good at listening the first 15 to 20 minutes and in 20-minute increments. So same thing with dogs. And if you have dogs that are super shy and fearful or super highly aroused, you're even going to want to go smaller than that, like 10, 15 minutes. So that's a good training tip for you. So cheerleading, good or bad? So cheerleading is when you're just repeatedly making noise to get a dog to do something or not to do something. So an example of good cheerleading would be when you are working with your puppy and you're saying, come here, puppy, come here, puppy, and you're being really loud and obnoxious. It's actually going to cause them to become very aroused and excited. So then they're going to want to come to you. So that is a good example of cheerleading. A bad example would be is if there's a dog fight and everyone's going, no, 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 stop, 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 stop. That's actually going to cause the dog fight to escalate even more. And when people watch me break up dog fights at the shelter, one thing that everyone notices is how quiet I am. I don't make any noise. I will make one clap sometimes to see if I can get their attention. But if that doesn't work, I'm very quiet and I work very quickly. But ideally is I'm just trying to cause no escalation in the other animals or escalation in the fight. So that would be a good example and a bad example of cheerleading. So make sure that you're using, repetitive, exciting language correctly. So we've talked about patience and persistence. I feel like I've talked about that pretty well about how my dog went into the store in the earlier slides. So just keep in mind that patience is important. It is a lot of work. It can be quite annoying for us in the beginning, but if you are persistent, you are going to yield really good results later on. So highly recommend trying to do all of the work when they're younger and not when they're older. Not that old dogs can't learn, they certainly can, but you are going to be teaching lifelong skills when you're first working with a pet. So hard mouth training. So for people that don't know what a hard mouth is, that is when a dog is really mouthy and they start biting at your hands. And this can happen for a lot of reasons. It can be because we teach it to them, like because the doctors are putting their fingers in the kennels and they think it's cute when dogs are nibbling on them or when they're biting, or people bite stuff when they're younger. But it's unfortunately not that fun. It's not as cute when they're older. So how we train that is you make a mimicking mother, like what the mother would do to the puppy if they got bit. So if a dog is putting their teeth on me and they're younger, or even if they're older dogs, you can do this depending on if they are dogs with less energy or high arousal. If they are a high arousal dog, which just high arousal just means overly excited, super stimulated animals, then I would use the mimicking behavior of the mother. And that just means I'll just display it right now. A dog bites me and I go, Beep! So it's a really loud, annoying yelp. It just lets them know, hey, you hurt me. Now some dogs will try it a couple of times, do it a few times, and just watch the dog. A lot of times, most dogs are going to be quiet and just kind of like look at you and kind of try to assess the situation. Now, if you get a dogs that get stimulated by that, then you should absolutely stop that training immediately and do wall training. And so for people that don't know what wall training is, that's when you anchor the dog on the wall or to a doorknob, and you walk up to them, and they are leashed essentially. They're on a leash. You walk up to them. The dog is sitting there and waiting for you. You come up, you pet the dog bites you, say, too bad, you walk away. You wait a couple of seconds, you come back and you repeat that. So that is, and so essentially they learn, hey, if I'm doing the right stuff, I get attention. When I'm not doing the right stuff, she walks away. So that is essentially what wall training is. You can look online about more wall training techniques, but basically it's just anchoring a dog and giving them attention when they're doing the right stuff. When they're not doing the right stuff, you walk away. Super effective. We use this a lot with our high energy, high arousal kiddos. Basic commands that I recommend: sit, down, stay, leave it. Oh, you know what? I should have put wait on here. Leave it's one of my favorite ones because if you have an animal with they drop something, like if you drop like blood pressure medication and they try to, you need to say leave it so they don't eat it. Or if you're walking with your dog and they're barking at a dog or a kid or a human, then you can just say leave it and they should leave it. So that's why the leave it command is one of my favorites. Wait is also one of my favorite commands to teach dogs because then teaching them to wait at a door before leaving without you releasing them can save their life. They can get hit by a car if they get out loose. So wait and leave it are two of my favorite basic commands. And if you're interested, do some advanced training, which is clicker training. Clicker training is great. I don't use clicker training at the shelter anymore. I did for a while, but it was actually confusing because some of the dogs would get clicker trained and they would like it, and then I would work with another dog, and then the other dogs would hear the clicker go, and then they get confused why they weren't getting rewarded. So clicker training is not super effective when you're in a room with a bunch of animals, but it is very effective with one-on-one training. The only thing that I would ask is the only thing that I don't like about clicker training is that the reward is the exact same for everything that you do. And I just don't think that's fair. I think if a dog sits, click. If a dog saves a baby from a train, click. I think that you should be giving higher rewards for higher behaviors. So just my thoughts. Okay, probably one of the biggest things I get asked in more basic behavior, not so much advanced, is how to get dogs to not jump on you. So first of all, I would like to say, do not reward dogs at all for any reason for jumping on you, not even with a reprimand. Dogs prefer negative attention over no attention at all, like human children. So for example, if you're saying, no, no, get down, pushing them away, that to them is better than you not giving them any attention at all. So they are going to try and do whatever they can to get your attention. So you need to remove the reward, turn aside from the jump, or completely at 180 degrees away is what I normally do. And then if the dog keeps jumping, then I will actually leave the room. I'll leave the room and then come back in through the door if they're jumping to that extent. Do not encourage the behavior at other times. So when we're coming into the house and the dog jumps up and we say, oh, we kiss them and we hug them, kiss them on the nose, you should not be encouraging jumping at all because that can be confusing because then they don't know when they can or cannot jump. And then leash train them to the wall, which is what I was talking about earlier, which is wall training that we use for high arousal. So you can anchor them to the wall, come up to them. If they jump on you, too bad. Walk away for a couple of seconds. Turn around, go back. No jump, goes into a sit, give them a treat immediately. This is very effective, and I can usually get the worst jumping dogs to get sit down within like a couple of minutes without jumping with the wall training. So I highly recommend it. Definitely try it out and let me know how it works for you. I wanted to share this with you. Sophia Yin is one of my favorite trainers, or was one of my favorite trainers. Unfortunately, she has passed away, but she's got amazing information. I highly recommend going to her website. She's got a plethora of books, videos, webinars. She's got some great visual aids. I've used some in this training, so definitely check her out. She's awesome. So this is something that she said that I really like. Positive reinforcement is not just about giving treats for good behavior. It's about moving and performing the exercises in a manner and speed that makes it fun. It's all about using everything your pet likes or wants to your advantage. Toys, petting, attention, access to go outside or come in, fetch, and more. So I thought she just, explained positive reinforcement beautifully, and I just wanted to share this with you. So I hope you enjoyed it. So back to getting a dog to walk on a leash. Every time you take a dog for a stroll, you're teaching him how to respond to his caretakers and to his environment. If you can spend a few moments teaching an unruly, over anxious dog how to behave, you'll not only make future walks go more smoothly, but also increase the dog's chances of finding a lifelong home. I like to share this because I see a lot of times volunteers will just, their goal is to get them in and out to go potty. And I think it's important that we're actually, if you can just take a minute, every minute you're with that animal is a teaching moment. So if you can teach them how to walk better, then you are increasing the dog's life, increasing the chances for that dog to get adopted. So I would like to urge you to think about that when you're walking the pets. Remember, you have the leash. You decide where you are going. That dog is walking you with you. You're not walking, so necessarily you're walking the dog. Excuse me. Wait for the slack. Hold your ground until the dog can focus on you, then begin walking. Use a basic command to do a quick training during the entire walk. It can be anything, sit down, stay, wait, any of those things. Change directions is a fun way to get dogs excited about their walks. A lot of times I'll play the red light, green light game. So especially for the higher energy dogs, and I'll say green light and start running really quickly, and then red light, and then they stop. So if the dog is, they're going to be following your body language. And if you're making your walks really fun, then they're going to really enjoy walks. So that's what I think is really fun about walking dogs, is that you can make it really fun for them too. And that way they're focusing on you and not the other things around them, like dogs and cars, and just a way to make it a lot funner. You're always going to be slower than the dog. It is your job to make it interesting. And while you're on your walk or anywhere else, I want you to keep in mind the dog's thresholds. So we ideally want to keep animals at or under, more so under than at, threshold. So under threshold is when a dog shows no sign of fear or anxious towards a stimuli present. This can be a dog, a cat, birds, car, bike, whatever. So we want them to show no signs of fear or anxiety, no barrier aggression, growling, barking, any of those things. At threshold is when the dog is at the point in which the dog may go from showing no fear or anxiety to showing some awareness to the stimuli. So you'll see a lot of alert behaviors, watching, staring, those kinds of things. So at and under are the time when you train animals. When they are over threshold, this is absolutely not the time to train an animal. And over threshold just means that the dog shows apparent signs of fear and anxiety towards the stimulus present. They can be growling, barking, lunging, all kinds of different things. And when they're doing this, they are over their threshold and they cannot rationalize, they cannot think. So when they're in that situation, you have to pull them away from that environment and put them into a safer, calmer area for them to calm down and relax before you can start training again. Just think about when you are in a really big fight with someone you care about or someone that you know. If you're in a really big fight, I can't just come up to you and say, "Okay, you guys are fine. Don't be mad anymore." That's not how it works. We have different stress hormones, cortisol levels raging. We are angry. Our adrenaline is high, and it can take us 1 to 2 days to even calm down and to be able to think about and rationalize. So these are things I want you to think about with dogs. Like, they cannot rationalize, they cannot calm down. It is normal for them to need time to calm down before they can deal with thresholds again. So I just want you to think about that while when you're walking a pet, because I see this a lot where dogs are growling and barking, and then the owners will ask the dog to sit and wait there. And I'm like, this is like the worst thing you can do. The best thing to do is to keep walking, sing the ABCs. I know that sounds silly, but singing the ABCs to calm them down, to hear a monotone voice so that they know that you're fine, and just keep on and remove yourself from the situation. Let the animals calm down before getting close to that stimuli. Keep them in that safe zone and out of that stimuli. So if they're not showing any anxiety towards the stimuli, or maybe a little bit of awareness, that's where all the training needs to happen. If you're a volunteer and you're watching this, and you're interested in working with some of our difficult dogs, please talk to the behavior department about working with approved handler only dogs. Even if they are approved handler only and you have been approved to work with some approved handler animals, know that each pet is different and they have a different prescription. So we need you to still talk to the behavior department before getting approved to work with each animal so that you know all that you need to know about that animal before working with them to keep you safe and the pets comfortable. Stay within your skill level is very important. We use DOT system, so please stay in your DOT system. If you would like to graduate to the next DOT, please let the behavior department know and we will help you with that. Have a large understanding of impulse control activities and how to redirect a dog that is highly aroused or overly excited or overreactive, and to be able to teach them and calm them down. Be ready to problem solve and figure out what triggers are with that particular animal and how you can help them from that situation. Always communicate with the behavior team, let them know what's going on, and consider joining the FAST team. You can contact us at behaviorteam@greatplainspca.org. We would love for you to work with our kids. And remember, when you're working with one of our pets at the shelter or one of your own pets or outside of the shelter, your choice affects your dog's choice. So here are some examples. Here's just an example of a case of growling to guard a toy. Your choices are to do nothing, which your dog thinks, I made the discomfort disappear. Your dog learns, I should growl when I feel uncomfortable. Your dog will growl whenever he doesn't want to do anything. Grr. Or you can punish the behavior and take away the toy. Your dog thinks, I told my person I was uncomfortable. He did not acknowledge my feelings. Your dog learns, I have to choose other ways to make myself understood. Your dog will choose worse behaviors. Or another option you can do is understand your dog's feeling and play for a win-win outcome. Step 1, follow this procedure. Show a treat and say, give me the ball. Wait for him to voluntarily open his mouth to let you go for the toy. Say, good boy, and throw a treat away from the ball. Throw the ball. Your dog thinks, when I give up my ball, good things happen. My person doesn't mean to rob me of my ball. Step 2, when your dog has learned to drop the ball before you show him the treat, just wait for him to drop the ball and then throw the ball. Only give a treat when playtime is wrapped up and the ball is put away. Your dog learns, I have nothing to lose when giving my ball to my person. Good things happen. Your dog will still readily give his toys. So this is just a fun way of just kind of understanding that each of our choices teach dogs what to do. So things to think about while you're working with our pets at the shelter. As a positive reinforcement trainer at Great Plains SPCA and as a positive reinforcement trainer of 16 years, I feel it's important to debunk the alpha role theory. This is my way of saying that exerting dominance over your dog is the wrong way to build a good relationship. This debate has its roots in 1940 study of captive wolves gathered from various places that, when forced to live together, naturally competed for status. Acclaimed animal behaviorist Rudolf Schneckel dubbed the male and female who won out the alpha pair. As it turns out, this research was based on a faulty premise. Wolves in the Wild, says L.D. Murch, founder of the Minnesota-based International Wolf Center, actually live in nuclear families, not randomly assembled units. It's which the mother and the fathers are the pack leaders, and their offspring status is based on the birth order. Meck, who used to ascribe to the alpha wolf theory, but has reversed course of recent years, says that pack's hierarchy does not involve anyone fighting to the top of the groups, because just like in human family, the youngsters naturally follow their parents' lead. For people that are more interested in learning more, I highly recommend reading the book Dominance in Dogs, Fact or Fiction. This talks about the relationships and why we thought that dominance alpha role theory was a popular theory. It is written by Barry Eaton, and it is a fantastic book. It teaches us stuff like when dogs eat before other dogs. That doesn't mean that they're a dominant dog. And in the wild, animals eat at a different pace than what we believe. So for example, if there is a kill, the breeders get to eat first to sustain life. If there's a large kill, they'll eat communally. Another thing, another dominant theory is that you have to walk in front of your dog. In the wild, they don't do that. They walk, they meander. That's why it's actually one of the hardest thing to do is to teach your dog to walk on a loose leash, is because they don't walk in a straight line. So these are just things to think about, and I highly recommend checking out this book or more about these theories if you're interested. I also highly recommend checking out this link about malignant behavior, the Caesar Milan effect. This is a great video of explaining why alpha training doesn't work and why we did think that it was effective earlier years. So I'm not going to play it for you today because it is a 10-minute video, but I highly recommend it if you're interested. Here is the link. So definitely check it out if you have a chance. Here are some recommendations from Great Plains SPCA, and these are recommendations that you will have to follow if you're working with our pets at our shelter. We highly recommend using easy walk harnesses, thunder shirts, positive reinforcement trainer, and high value treats. Just remember that high value treats just means really, really yummy treats that the dog really, really wants. Not recommended are pinch collars, choke chains, alpha rolls, physical manipulation, yanking, pulling, or jerking of the dogs on leash. I get the question a lot of what is an alpha roll. So for those that don't know what an alpha roll is, that is when an animal is doing an undesired behavior. And then the trainer or person working with that pet will grab them and flip them over on their back and hold them to the ground. This causes an incredibly competitive environment and can cause the animal to bite. So we highly recommend not to do this, and this is going to cause a lot of distrust between the pets and their caretakers and owners. This is also another one of those debunking of alpha training theories. In the wild, when animals did alpha rolls to other animals, they were actually kicking them out of their pack and making them leave the area. This is not what we want to signify to our pets when we're doing an alpha roll, and so that's why it can be very confusing for dogs when an alpha roll does happen to them. So highly, highly, highly do not recommend doing that, as it puts yourself in danger and causes mass confusion for the pet. Another thing that is absolutely important is that you always end on a positive note. Every time in a dog training session, if you're doing a training session, we want the dog to leave on a positive note and really excited about that training session. So if you're working with a dog and you're saying, sit, and they sit and you get a treat, and then you say, lay down, lay down, lay down, lay down, and the dog doesn't get it, that causes a lot of frustration. So at the end of the training, work on some very easy tips that they can do so that they know that they've left in a really positive note. And so that next time when you come to see them, they're going to get excited about the training session instead of annoyed that they're going to get yelled at. So I highly recommend always leaving on a positive note, no matter what. Real quick, we're going to go through some shelter language that I may have used or you may be hearing in the shelter environment. So I just wanted you to understand what these words means. Lure and reward just means that you're luring the pet to follow you for a treat. And a reward is anything that the dog wants as a reward for doing a desired behavior. High value treats as a reward just means a really delicious treat. It can be really delicious treat, it can be a toy, it can be affection, it can be anything that that animal finds of high value and will work for. Prey drive, which we did not talk about in this training session, but I do want to share, just means that they have a drive to chase after small animals, sometimes large. Hard mouth is when they are very mouthy with your hands, and sometimes they bite hard. They usually becomes from when a puppy has a hard mouth and then they don't learn that they can't chew and bite. And then it turns into something else and escalates to where you've got larger dogs being very mouthy. You see this a lot in like cattle dogs and stuff like that. Resource guarding is when an animal is guarding something that they hold a value. This can be a treat, a toy, a person, a space, a bed, anything like that. Anytime they're guarding it, that is what we call resource guarding. Positive reinforcement, I feel like we've talked about that a lot today, but positive reinforcement is when you're adding a behavior or a treat or a reward to reinforce a desired behavior. NELF is what we call nothing in life is free training. So they have to earn everything that they get. Clicker training is when you have training and every time they do a desired behavior, they get a click to notify that a reward is going to be coming soon. A positive reward marker is the same as the click sound. I use the word yes, so the dog sits, I go yes, And that lets them know that I'm going to be getting them a reward of some kind. Not always food, but they will be getting a reward. A no reward marker is when you just let the dog know that they did the wrong desired behavior. So I ask the dog to do, they're jumping up on me as they're mounted to the wall or anchored to the wall. I jump up and I say, too bad, and then I walk away. So their no reward marker just lets them know that they gave me an undesired behavior and they will not be getting rewarded for it. I hope these tips will help you as you go through this training session or when you're working at the shelter. If you have any questions at all regarding advanced animal behavior, please feel free to email me, Ashley Flores, the Director of Animal Behavior and Training at Great Plains SPCA at aflores@greatplainspca.org for any questions you may have regarding advanced animal behavior. I hope you enjoyed this training and I look forward to hearing from you. If you're interested in learning more, here are some resources that I have cited and some recommended readings that I think that you'll find highly beneficial in learning more advanced animal behavior. Patricia McConnell, an amazing dog trainer. Ian Dunbar, amazing dog trainer. Victoria Stillwell, most people know her. Sarah Colnace, one of my favorites. Dr. Sophia Yin, also one of my favorites. Highly recommend all of these trainers. Please feel free to check them out.